Education.
Hi, my name's Andrea, and I work for the New Jersey Forest Service. Recently, I've been thinking, have you ever walked through a forest and wondered about the trees surrounding you? How can you tell one type of tree from another? What are their names? What are they known for? If you have, we're about to blow your mind. At the New Jersey Forest Service, we love trees, and we have tips, tricks, and information to help you learn how to identify them. Once you're able to identify trees, walking through the forest will never look the same. It's a whole new world. So join us on this journey to learn about dendrology, the science of studying and identifying trees. First, let's define dendrology. Dendrology is just a fancy word for the study of trees. To be specific, dendrologists focus on the identification of woody plants by studying their unique characteristics. Think of these characteristics like clues, and think of us, dendrologists, as detectives. This video will highlight the main clues, or tree characteristics, that you can use to solve the mystery of a tree's species. The clues we'll walk you through to identify trees are the range, habitat, bark, leaf persistence, arrangement, buds and leaves, smell, flowers, fruits and seeds. But before we dive into how to identify trees, it's important to understand why trees have the names they do. If you're not a scientist, you're probably most familiar with what are called common names. Common names often describe a visible feature of a tree, like a tulip tree with its flowers that look similar to tulips. Common names can be pretty easy to remember, but a single species can have more than one common name based on the region it's in, the language nearby citizens speak, or the time period it was named. For example, tulip trees have other common names, like tulip poplar and yellow poplar. It's also been called canoe wood because Native Americans used it to make dugout canoes, whitewood because of the color of its wood, and fiddle tree because of the shape of its leaves. All these different common names can make it hard to know what species someone is talking about. We can thank the Swedish biologist Carl Linnaeus for coming up with a solution to the confusion. Way back in 1758, he developed a standard classification system called taxonomy that gives every living thing a scientific name, even humans. The taxonomic system puts organisms into groups based on how related they are to each other. In taxonomy, the names are always in Latin, so no matter what your first language is, or which common name you learned, the scientific name remains the same. While there are 7 levels of the taxonomic system, we simply use the last 2 to refer to a specific organism, genus and species. Using scientific names helps avoid confusion caused when organisms have several common names. For example, if your neighbor tells you that they love watching birds in the red oak tree in their backyard, you might not know exactly what species they're talking about. Several of the oak species in New Jersey can be classified as red oak. But if your neighbor instead uses the scientific name, Quercus coccinea, you might look at them a little funny, but now you know exactly which species they're talking about. There are an estimated 73,000 tree species on Earth. North America alone has about 1,873 tree species, whereas New Jersey is home to about 120 native tree species. But memorizing 120 scientific names is still a daunting task. If you want to know more about the most common trees in New Jersey and their scientific names, check out our Trees of New Jersey video here. So what even is a tree? You know one when you see it, but let's define it first to make sure we're all on the same page. Trees are perennial, meaning they continue to grow year after year. They typically have a single elongated woody stem, from which branches grow to form a crown, and they are often more than 15 feet tall at maturity. Trees can sometimes be confused with shrubs, which are woody plants that don't get as tall as trees, and they form multiple trunks, like high-bush blueberry. But keep in mind that these are general rules. Trees might sometimes form multiple trunks or be shorter than 15 feet at maturity. As with everything in nature, trees have a lovely tendency to surprise us and not play by our rules. All trees have bark, branches, buds, leaves, and seeds. Some trees even have flowers and fruits. If you're unfamiliar with what these things look like, not to worry. We'll walk you through all of them in more detail. For now, it's important to understand that the big or subtle differences in these tree characteristics are the key to solving the mystery of one species versus another. Now that we've touched on what dendrology is, how trees are classified and named, and the basic parts of the tree, we are ready to jump into tree identification. So grab your magnifying glass, put on your detective hat, and let's go gather some clues.
Ah, what a lovely day it is to be walking through the forest. Wow, what a big, beautiful tree. I wonder what kind it is.
When you see a tree that you want to identify, there are 10 major clues that you can gather to help you solve your mystery. Working your way through these clues is very similar to playing games like Choose Your Own Adventure, Guess Who, or 20 Questions. So let the game begin. We will start with clues that are broad and about the area a tree is in, and finish with clues that are more specific to the tree itself. For example, we're going to identify this tree together. If you happen upon a mystery tree in the woods, you first want to consider, where in the world am I? Trees are restricted to geographical ranges where the soil and climate are suitable for the species' growth and reproduction. We call this a tree's native range. It is common to hear range discussed in terms of country and state boundaries. For example, Magnolia virginiana, or Sweet Bay magnolia, is found in the United States, all the way from New York to Florida and Texas. Keep in mind that species ranges are not fixed. As climate change continues to impact weather patterns, many tree species' historic ranges in the northern United States are expected to continue shifting northeast in the coming years. It's also important to note that a tree's native range refers to where it grows naturally, but a lot of trees are planted outside of their native range. So if you're not sure whether your mystery tree is growing there naturally or if it was planted there, you can skip the range clue and move on to the others. So in our effort to identify this tree, where are we now, Detective?
Well, I can see from my map that I'm in northern New Jersey in Stoke State Forest. Since I'm deep in the woods, I'm going to guess that this tree was not planted, and we're likely within its native range.
Great. We'll make a note of that and go on to our next clue. Now that you've determined your region, look around. What kind of physical conditions is your tree surrounded by? Ecologists use the word habitat to describe the physical aspects of the location where a plant or animal lives. Plant habitats are determined by things like soil texture, available water, nutrients, light and space, temperature, and the frequency and type of disturbances a site experiences. Using your senses of sight and touch can clue you into what is arguably the most important parts of a plant's habitat: soil moisture and texture. There are many different types of soil, ranging from coarse and sandy to finer soils like silt and even clay. Sandy soils with large grains let water pass through easily, so they dry out rapidly. Silt and fine clay soils have much smaller grains and are able to hold onto water for a longer period of time. Some scientists say soil moisture is the most important factor when differentiating between plant habitats, because plants are restricted by how much water they need or can tolerate. So go on, touch that soil. Is it wet? Did your boots squish into the mossy ground? Is it dry? Does it remind you of beach sand? Or is it somewhere in between? Keep in mind, natural habitats are always changing, from events like a single tree falling in the woods to a multi-acre wildfire. Disturbance is natural and can be slow and subtle or big and sudden. No matter the type or intensity of disturbances, the resulting changes in growing space, soil conditions, or light availability will allow for new trees or different species to take root and grow. While disturbance can be harmful to parts of the forest, it can also be beneficial for individual trees or the site as a whole. So, Detective, what can you tell us about the habitat of our mystery tree?
Well, when I touch the soil, it feels a bit dry, but not really sandy, and it doesn't stick together like clay either. If I look around, I don't see any bodies of water. I'm in an area with lots of terrain changes, and this particular tree is pretty high up on the slope. I'm also going to guess there hasn't been much disturbance, because I don't see any evidence of recent fire, storms, or human development.
Excellent work! The habitat you described is an upland forest and has dry, well-drained soil. That narrows down the possibilities for our mystery tree, but there are still plenty of species it could be. Let's move on to our next clue to get a better idea of what species we might be looking at. After determining range and habitat, it's time to look at the tree itself, specifically at the bark. Bark is a tree's outer covering, which provides it protection, just like our skin protects us. We'll start with the bark because no matter the time of year, the bark is easy to see and can give major clues to the species. Some key characteristics of tree bark are its texture, color, thickness, and lenticels. Let's start with the texture, which varies widely. It can be smooth, ridged or furrowed, peeling, flaky, or scaly. Don't be shy, get up close and touch the bark. Then stand back and take in the overall look of the bark from a distance. Both perspectives help us with IDing trees. The best way to become familiar with different bark textures and what they look like in nature is to look at and touch all sorts of examples. Now let's talk color. While bark color can range spectacularly, with extreme examples being the tropical rainbow eucalyptus tree, most of our New Jersey trees have subtler color differences. These distinctions can be difficult to pick up on if you're new to IDing, but don't be discouraged. Just like texture, looking at examples will make you a color expert in no time. Lenticels, which means little lens, are small openings or pores on the surface of plants that allow gases and water vapor to exchange between the atmosphere and the plant's tissue. Since lenticels' shape, size, and orientation can be different on different species, this is a great ID characteristic too. When using the bark as an IDing clue, it's important to understand that bark color and texture can change as a tree ages. Bark on young trees is often fairly smooth, but on older trees, bark can become more textured. For example, Prunus serotina, or black cherry, has reddish-brown, smooth bark with obvious horizontal lenticels when it's young, but dark brown, flaky bark that looks like burnt cornflakes when it's older. Alrighty, Detective, it's your turn. What stands out about the bark of our mystery tree? It's okay if you can't describe all of the characteristics I mentioned. Look for the ones that are most noticeable to you.
Well, to start, this is a pretty tall and wide tree, so I'm guessing it's not a young tree, and I should be looking for mature bark characteristics. When I look at the color and texture of the bark, it has dark brown to black, shallow furrows with reddish lines in the middle, and lighter colored, smooth ridges.
Awesome job paying attention to those little details. I'd say you're on the right track, but let's move on to the next clue to see if you're barking up the right tree. It's finally time to look at the part of the tree you probably wanted to look at first, the green part. To start, we'll consider whether the leaves or needles stay on the tree throughout the year. This is what we call leaf persistence. There are two main groups of trees which generally align with leaf persistence: deciduous and coniferous. Deciduous trees typically have broad leaves and will drop those leaves every year in the fall. Examples of deciduous trees are maples, oaks, ashes, and hickories. In contrast, coniferous trees, also called conifers or evergreens, have thin, needle-like or scale-shaped leaves that remain on the tree year-round, keeping them evergreen. Conifers include pines, spruces, and cedars. But remember, we warned you that plants don't always play by our rules. Not all conifers are evergreen, and not all broadleaf trees are deciduous. For example, large trees are conifers that drop all their needles in the winter, so they are not evergreens. An American holly tree is an evergreen, but it doesn't have needle or scale-like leaves. It's a broadleaf tree. Despite these rule breakers, generally, here in New Jersey, leaf persistence helps us to determine whether a leaf is coniferous or deciduous, bringing us one step closer to solving the puzzle of our mystery tree's identity. So, my fellow detective, what do we think? Is our tree evergreen or deciduous?
Well, it's not winter, so leaf persistence is a little harder to determine, but based on the fact that the leaves are broadly shaped, I would say it's deciduous.
Very good. So you know, there are ways to determine leaf persistence in the summer, but for our purposes, your hunch was right. Let's head on to clue 5. Leaves and branches can be arranged in 3 different ways: opposite, alternate, or whorled. Opposite branches and leaves are paired directly opposite from one another at the same point on the stem, which is called the node. There are few groups of trees in New Jersey that grow in an opposite arrangement. These include almost all species of maple, ash, dogwood, and horse chestnut. We use the acronym MADHORSE to make it easy to remember opposite branching. Oh, he doesn't look so bad. Oh, now he does. In contrast, when the leaves or branches are attached in a staggered pattern on alternating nodes, they are called alternate. Alternate branching is the most common type of arrangement. Finally, the whorled arrangement is the least common. It is when 3 or more leaves or branches attach to a single node, creating a ring of leaves or branches. A word of caution: if the leaves are growing very close together, or if a tree has dropped some branches or leaves, then that specific part of the tree might appear to be opposite or alternate. A good tree detective will look all around the tree before determining leaf arrangement. How are the branches and leaves arranged on our mystery tree?
I scanned the whole tree, and I can say that it definitely is not whorled, and I don't see any instances of opposite branching. So I think it's safe to say that our tree is alternately branched.
Sherlock Holmes better watch out. There's a new detective, or should I say dendrologist, in town. Bud identification is very useful in the winter when deciduous trees have dropped their leaves. On the other hand, it's difficult to ID tree buds in spring and summer after what's called bud break, when the new buds are not yet fully formed. Buds look like tiny knobs on a twig. In spring, they develop into a flower, leaf, or shoot. They come in all different shapes and sizes depending on the species, and their texture can be smooth, hairy, or scaly. But it's not just how they look, but also the way the buds are arranged on the twig that gives clues about the species ID. For example, all species in the oak genus, Quercus, have a cluster of buds at the tip of the twigs. Now, here is where your magnifying glass, or hand lens, called a loupe, comes in handy. Buds are small structures, so it's often helpful to view them under magnification. How would you describe the buds on our mystery tree?
I can see some buds clustered together at the tip of the twig, and it looks like they have layers of overlapping scales. I might even see some tiny hairs on the buds.
Excellent observations, my budding dendrologist friend. But since it's summertime, we have to keep in mind that the buds might not be fully formed yet. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for, the leaves. Have you ever tried to count how many leaves are on a tree? Impossible, right? Well, there are about as many terms to describe leaves as there are leaves on a tree. Don't worry, we'll break it down for you. And if you're feeling overwhelmed as we go through, think of it like learning a new language. It's difficult at first, but as you practice, you pick it up gradually over time. Pretty soon, you'll be a fluent dendrologist. The different parts of a leaf are the blade, apex or tip, base, margin or the leaf edge, midrib or the vertical center of the leaf, veins, which is where water and sugars pass through, petioles, which is where the leaf connects to the twig, and stipioles, which are small leaf-like appendages at the base of the petiole. We're going to walk you through how dendrologists describe some of the more common leaf ID factors, like color and texture, single versus compound leaves, general leaf blade shapes, the shapes of leaf bases and tips, leaf lobing, leaf margins, and the different venation patterns that leaves can have. Phew! Okay, let's get started with an easy one, color and texture. These are great identifiers. The leaves of some tree species are different shades of green, or even a whitish color on the underside, like white oaks and white ash. Texture-wise, the leaves might be covered with dense hair, like black oaks. They might have sparse tiny hairs, or they might be completely smooth. Reach out and feel the leaves. You'll find that some are thin, like beech, others are rough to the touch, like post oak, and still others are thick and waxy, like American holly. The list goes on. So remember, try to touch the leaf to feel its texture, and turn it over to make note of the color and hairiness on both sides of the leaf. But use caution. During your New Jersey travels, you may come across poison ivy, poison sumac, or poison oak. These plants contain an irritating oil that causes skin rashes. Before getting too touchy-feely out there, check our guide to itch-inducing plants in New Jersey, linked in the description box. And if you have any doubts, do not touch. Next, we'll determine whether the leaves are simple or compound. A simple leaf has a single blade with a single bud coming off a twig. In contrast, if the leaf is divided into many blades attached to a single bud, it is a compound leaf, and each of those individual blades are called leaflets. Compound leaves can be pinnately, bipinnately, or palmately compound. Take a look at these pictures to help you understand the differences. The leaflets of a pinnately compound leaf attach to a single central axis. Bipinnately compound is similar, but they have additional secondary axes branching off the center. In contrast, palmate compound leaves, named like the palm of your hand, have one point from which a cluster of leaves splays out. Remember the words pinnate and palmate because we're going to see them again. Whether simple or compound, leaf blades can be many different shapes. So many, in fact, that we won't cover them all in this video. But not to worry, we made a supplementary ID guide to leaf shapes. So for all those dedicated detectives among us, check out the link in the description below this video. For now, we'll mention that conifers have needle-like leaves, either in bundles as with pine trees, or singly, like we see on hemlock and spruce. Conifer leaves can also be shaped more like little overlapping scales, like we see on cedar trees. Deciduous trees have a much wider variety of leaf shapes. Some of the most common blade shapes include linear, like a willow, ovate, elliptic, cordate, or heart-shaped like redbud, orbicular, and spatulate, like a blackjack oak. Leaves are often so variable that they can't always be defined as one specific shape. For example, black cherry leaves are often described as oblong ovate, and the American chestnut leaves are described as oblong lanceolate. Some leaves are tricky because they are lobed or deeply indented. This means that lobed leaves might not have a clear blade shape. Instead, it's the number and shape of lobes that are better clues to figuring out specific species. Oak leaves are pinnately lobed because the indentations are towards the midrib, like a feather. Other species like maples have palmately lobed leaves, where the lobes are oriented towards the base of the leaf, like a human hand or a fan. Just like lobing, the tips and bases of leaves have their own shapes, which can complicate blade shape and identification. But depending on the tree, the shape of the tip or base can be an immediate clue to the tree's ID, so they shouldn't be discounted. Leaf margins or edges also come in a variety of shapes and are great identification clues. So check out that supplementary ID guide in the description for the names and pictures of the broad range of shapes that leaf tips, bases, and margins can be. Our last leaf clue is venation pattern, which is the pattern of the leaf's veins. Pinnate venation is where the side veins attach to the midrib, like on a feather. Palmate venation has 3 or more primary veins that originate from a single point at the base of the leaf, like we see on a maple leaf and sweet gum leaves. As before, the supplementary guide linked below has more info on venation types for you to explore on your own.
I'm going to be honest, I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by the amount of things I have to remember just about the leaves.
I know it's a lot, but you don't always need to know or describe every leaf detail right off the bat. Pick out the features that seem most distinctive, and that will usually get you most of the way to an identification. Once you've narrowed it down, you can go back and look for more details or clues based on your short list of suspects.
Alright, I'll give it a go. The top of the leaf is a dull green, and the texture is smooth, not rough or hairy. I checked the underside too, and it's paler green, with the little hairs where the veins come together. As for the shape, it has several lobes. I checked a few leaves, and it looks like there's roughly 7 to 11 lobes, depending on the leaf. The tip of each lobe is tapered to a very fine, needle-thin point. I can see from my supplementary identification guide that it's called a bristle tip. As far as the edge goes, it's smooth, which the ID guide says is called an entire margin. For venation, it looks like it has pinnate veins.
Whoa! You got a ton of information out of those leaves. Great observations. I don't want to speak too soon, but I think we might have some sort of oak tree on our hands. But I won't jump ahead. We'll leave the final identification until after we get through the next 3 clues. Here's a fun clue. Some species have very specific aromas that you can smell by crushing a leaf or scratching at a small twig. Because these smells can be so distinctive, they are a helpful identifier. For example, the twigs of Betula lenta, black birch or sweet birch, smell like spearmint gum when a little bit of the thin bark is scratched off. This clue helps to separate it from other look-alike species. Other fun tree scents are the leaves of liquid amber striaciflua, known as sweet gum, which have a soapy smell like a household cleaning product. And the leaves of Sassafras albidum, commonly known as sassafras, smell just like Fruit Loops. Ponderosa pine, a western species, is probably the most famous for its smell, and has bark that smells like butterscotch or vanilla. Are there any smells you can pick up on?
Well, when I crush the leaves or scratch away the thin bark on a twig, I don't really notice any special smells. But I will say that the forest smells amazing today.
Well, I guess we'll have to content ourselves with a great smelling forest and move on to the next clue to continue unraveling our tree's mystery identity. Many trees flower for a few weeks in the springtime. Some are colorful and showy, like dogwood and black cherry, while others can seem drab or nondescript, and not very flower-like at all, as with oaks and hickories. Tree flowers can be helpful in species ID, but unfortunately, they're only present for a short window of time, so we can't rely on them to always be available as an identification clue. If you're interested into delving into the fascinating variety of tree flowers, check out the references linked below. Detective, what's the 411? Any flowers on our tree?
That's a negative. No flowers present.
Roger that, Detective. We've made it to our final clue. To wrap up this dendrology case, we need to talk about fruits and seeds. All trees produce seeds that are protected by a type of hard structure, like a pod, cone, or nut, or inside a soft fleshy structure like a fruit. The most common types of tree fruits or seeds include nuts, such as walnuts or acorns, cones produced by coniferous trees, samaras, dry seed pods from maples or ash. As kids, we fondly called maple samaras helicopters for the way that the paired samaras flutter to the ground. Capsules that form the spiky balls from sweet gum trees, pods from locust trees that look like overgrown bean pods, pomes, the fleshy fruit from the rose family, like apples, stone fruits or drupes that have a single hard pit like peaches, and berries like persimmons that have many seeds inside. Remember, every time you crunch into a crisp apple or pear, peel a juicy orange, or enjoy pecans and walnuts in your trail mix, you're eating a part of a tree. Yum. But never put a fruit or seed in your mouth unless you're absolutely sure it's edible. It doesn't hurt to consult an expert. Even if the fruit or seed is safe to consume, you may be personally allergic, so it's always better to stay safe than sorry. Otherwise, the tree species won't be the only mystery we're solving that day. This is your last clue, my dendrologist detective friend. Any fruits or seeds that can be seen on our mystery tree or on the ground around the base of the tree.
It looks like the tree is growing lots of acorns, which all seem like they're a little less than an inch long, with a flat cap that sort of looks like a flying saucer.
Perfect. That caps off our list of clues nicely.
Now that we've gathered all of our clues, what do we do to solve our mystery?
Well, there's a couple of different options. Using all of our clues, we can now consult identification resources armed with information. My favorite place to start is with a dichotomous key. Now, the name dichotomous key may be a little intimidating, but it's essentially what we just did together. Dichotomous keys will ask you a series of questions, and with each additional question, it will narrow down the possible species of your mystery tree. There are both online and printed versions of dichotomous keys, and they are usually regionally based, which means the answer to your first clue will help you pick which dichotomous key to use. One of my favorites is the key called What Tree Is That? A guide to the more common trees found in North America, which is published by the Arbor Day Foundation, and it's available in print and online. Whether or not you use a dichotomous key to identify your tree, a tree identification book is a great way to narrow down your suspects or to verify the identification the dichotomous key made. Each tree ID book is set up differently and will walk you through their own identification process, but understanding the words used to describe tree ID characteristics and having the answers to the 10 clues above will prepare you to use any tree ID book. One of my favorites for New Jersey trees is Princeton Field Guide's Trees of Eastern North America. Another great guide that fits in your pocket is New Jersey Trees and Wildflowers, a folding pocket guide to familiar plants. If you stop by the Forest Resource Education Center in Jackson, New Jersey, We also have a comprehensive guide to the trees of New Jersey and the Mid-Atlantic states that you can purchase there. Another tool that you might have seen are plant identification apps that you can download to your phone. Some will prompt you to take a picture, while others will act more like a dichotomous key, asking you a series of questions like our 10 clues above, and then provide you with possible identifications. But even though this seems like an easy route, you should be careful with these tools as they can struggle to provide accurate identifications. Remember that plants don't always follow the rules, and the apps have not been trained to recognize the wondrous variation that exists in nature. So when using a plant ID app, take its ID with a grain of salt, and verify it using other sources such as a tree ID book or a trusted website. Finally, human experts are an excellent resource to help identify or verify your mystery tree. Where can you find experts? Right here. At the New Jersey Forest Service, we're always happy to help with tree ID. If you have a tree identification question, feel free to shoot us an email at askaforester@dep.nj.gov. So, with me as your expert, let's figure out what tree we have here.
I think we can safely say we have an oak tree, seeing as it is a deciduous, alternate branching tree with clustered terminal buds, pinnately lobed leaves, and pinnate venation. But the biggest clue was the acorns.
I agree. The leaf lobes with bristle tips tells us that it's some sort of red oak, not a white oak. The bark you described, which looks sort of like ski tracks, is a classic sign of Quercus rubra, or northern red oak. This ID matches with the acorns you saw, which are a little less than an inch in size, with flat disc-like caps.
Wow, I think we've made a positive ID. How cool!
And what's even cooler is that northern red oak just so happens to be New Jersey's state tree. What a coincidence.
That was actually a lot of fun.
I agree. But while we love trees at the New Jersey Forest Service and have a lot of fun identifying them, tree ID and dendrology is way more than just a hobby for us. Foresters use dendrology to help solve a wide variety of problems, like deciding which species should be promoted for wildlife habitat protection or ecosystem restoration, or what species should be controlled because they're invasive and damaging. Often, tree species look similar, but are quite different and have different implications for forest management. For example, the invasive tree of heaven, or Ailanthus altissima, can look like some of our native trees, such as sumac, black walnut, or ash. If left unmanaged, tree of heaven will form thickets that crowd out native species, attract the invasive spotted lanternfly, and secrete a chemical into the soil, which is toxic to other plants. For these reasons, we want to promote and protect native trees, while controlling the tree of heaven population, and hopefully eradicating it wherever possible. By becoming dendrologist detectives, we know the clues to look for in differentiating between native and invasive species such as these, which help us know the proper management steps to take. That's why forest data is so important, and accurate tree identification as a part of that data is way more than just a want. It's a need. Want to know about forest data in New Jersey? Click here. If you're curious to learn more about why we manage forests in New Jersey, check out our video here. Curious about how we manage forests? Then this video on silviculture, the study of forest management, will answer your questions. And if you just want to know more about our most common native New Jersey trees, this is the video for you. Thank you for joining us today to learn about dendrology, the basics of tree identification, and the importance of accurate identification for forest management. If you have any questions or want help with your identification mystery, please feel free to reach out to us at askaforester@dep.nj.gov. and stay tuned for some other Pocket presentations.